Hi folks, you're with Tasteless today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the globalist, internationally coordinated and scripted hysterical propaganda campaign to demonize all white countries that were involved in organized schooling of native children in whether it be Australia or Canada, New Zealand, the United States or wherever. They only focus on what white countries did. If it was the, say the Hispanic things in South America, they don't seem so concerned about it. But if it's Australia or Canada, then the globalist propagandists are right into it, demonizing the crap out of white people, saying their intent was evil, it was genocidal, it was so on. Now, a good representation of that, which is not unique to Canada, by the way, it happens elsewhere around the world, but we could see it on full sort of bright shining display in Canada when there was a claim made that in the grounds of what had hitherto been a native child education school, I think run by one of the like the Uniting Church or one of the religious groups, for education of these kids, was to that dead bodies had allegedly been found of children, and many of them, was the claim, in the grounds of the former school. I think it was a school at the time, in the grounds of the school. Now, at this stage, there was no evidence. There had been some geophys type mapping of the ground, and substances that may have been human or of human origin were possibly possibly were there. Now, at this stage, there was no evidence of anything. Someone had floated the idea. Who had floated that idea? Where did it come from? It seemed like organized activism, as far as I could tell. And then the entire international media scrum, and particularly in Canada, the entire media scrum erupted with one voice, all with the same talking points, all with the same rationale, as indeed did the body politic. And that unemployed school teacher moron, Justin Trudeau, of course, has to get up and cry. I mean, what a fucking moron. Now, again, there's no evidence at this stage. Now, you'd say if you were a government administrator or anyone, reasonably concerned with it, if somebody comes up with that, you'd be saying, hey, hold on a minute, there's no evidence. Come hysteria, we're going to get teams in there, and we're going to do some excavation, and we're going to have a look. Now, straight away, the activists from the Indian tribes go, no, you can't touch that, it's sacred ground. And there was a lot of toing and froing around that. It was a narrative that the activists, the globalists, and of course the Indian tribe activists, they wanted it to be true. There are many bodies, little children, little tiny children, little babies murdered by evil white genocidal maniacs. That's the narrative we want, so let's run with that. So, hey, everybody stop, just take a chill. So finally, after the hysteria had reached its zenith, there were some excavations and so on. And what it was found to be, it had formerly been like a sewerage or a septic tank system, and the residue of what obviously had been human waste, the residue there gave off readings that would have been similar had it been decomposing human tissue, but this was all like feces and stuff like that. It was just a sewage tank, or septic tank rather, sewage system. So there were no bodies, no bones, no nothing was found there. It was complete, absolute zero, nada, zilch. But did the media then run similar campaigns as indeed the body politic, saying, well, you know what, we were wrong there. Wow, did we get this wrong? We shouldn't have jumped like that. We should have been sober, sensible, reasonable custodians of the public trust, and we should have done proper investigation, examination. The media failed 100% to be custodians of the public trust, and instead they went full bore nuclear levels of hysteria even though they had no evidence, that is, no evidence whatsoever to support the claim. Now, the media around protection saying, well, the guy did the geophysical said it might have been, we're only saying what he said. And so everybody was finger pointing and saying, well, we didn't say it. They said it. We only repeated what they said. And so there's a lot of finger pointing there. But the idea was that this was, or the notion was that this was something unique to Canada, that this sort of stuff only happened in Canada, and there was only this evil brutality and genocidal white Hitler Nazi maniacs. And but in fact, they run exactly the same propaganda lines in Australia and New Zealand and parts of the United States. So this is an internationally scripted, coordinated, and centrally planned propaganda campaign to shame, blame all white people, and it feeds quite nicely back into evil colonial empires. The colonists, the colonials were all evil, bad, genocidal Hitlers, and so on. So it goes back into that loop, which again is aggressively pushed and centrally scripted and coordinated. So it's got nothing to do whether there were any bad things happening or not. It's a device they use, again, to shame, blame white people. Now, I looked at some of the propaganda pieces, not only in Australia, but in Canada, New Zealand too, but in Canada, and they show photographs of, this is, say, in the 1960s, where it's still going on, 1960s photographs of children, this is native, indigenous children, or part native, sitting in a classroom with a white teacher. It doesn't say what they're being taught. It could be anything, I suppose. But this was put out. These photographs were put out as back in the 60s as being an example or indication of great social good. Now, the description they use today, see these cruelly oppressed native children, oppressed by evil white colonial people, and here this photograph proves it. Look at them all sitting there oppressed as Hitler stands up. Stop. If I get my class photo from, a little bit later, but around that same year, if I get my class photo there, it looks exactly the same. I mean, you couldn't tell. White children in my photo, but you couldn't. They look exactly the same. But somehow the white people in exactly the same setting and circumstances and photo are the right things being done. Now, at the time, and even earlier than that, at times, well, how do we, these native Indians don't seem to be integrating too well in white society. How can we help this along? Now, a lot of the tribal societies were very dysfunctional, and they frequently abandoned their children, and the mortality rate was quite high. So children would often be without parents, and other relatives weren't interested in looking after them. So the state was regularly entering the fray there to look after their children, as indeed they were many white children. So you look at the white child orphanages, even up until the 1960s, they were certainly very well stocked with children, as indeed were these native ones. So to suggest that this was some unique evil that was perpetrated, inflicted upon only native children is a lie. It's an absolute blatant lie. But the view was that, okay, in order to help these children, this is the native children, in order to help these children integrate, why don't we give them a good, rigorous education? And, that'll sort of socialize them into white sort of ways of life, and socialize and give them an education and prepare them for employment in, the trades or whatever. So this was done. Now, remember, this is taken on at the expense of the taxpayer. So it would, I would argue, it's good social work. Now, is it more desirable that these children be with an intact family? And they said, well, yeah, but there weren't the intact families for them to be with. The other sort of propaganda line is that the white people just rando walked around tribal areas or districts or anything, that sort of thing, and heartlessly and cruelly and Nazi-like with swastikas, ripped these little babies, screaming little babies, dressed in pink, by the way, screaming little babies, ripped from their mother's arms as the mother screamed and pleaded, Hitler, Hitler, please don't take my baby. No, that wasn't what happened. That wasn't what was going on. The mother was probably dead or drunk or had abandoned the child. So the child was being taken into foster care as is considered to be the good Christian thing to do, and not leave the children or the child in a deprived situation. And good Christian conscience demanded they be taken into care, fed and clothed. Now, all the kids in the photograph look very clean. They've got nice uniforms on, they've got good haircuts, and they don't look emaciated or starved or anything like that. So there was very much a charitable motivation. Now, you could argue, well, it wasn't really charitable. What they really trying to do is what Hitler was. No, it was a charitable motive. Now, was it misguided in some way? Could you argue that, is there a different way of doing it or a better way of doing it? Or could it have been done this or that? Yeah. Well, yeah, you can debate those points. But was it a well-intentioned charitable act? Well, sure it was. How successful was it? Well, if you look at all the people that, I was talking to a Canadian Indian guy in Sydney some time ago, and he's quite well spoken. He went to one of these schools, and he did quite well academically, and he got like a scholarship thing, again taxpayer funded, to go to university where, I don't know about his choice, if he studied some sociology or something, which I think radicalized him. And he probably could have gone into something worthwhile, but anyway, he ended up, getting a job, and I think it was in a Quango or something like that. So it probably wasn't a real job, but he was by all standards, reasonably well educated, quite well spoken, and so on. And he wanted to sort of, as part of his activism, walk around like an Indian with longer hair and beads, and I said, well, fine. I'm not sure how that does you any good. But he says that people that from his particular Indian tribe or area, hardly any of them are doing any good. And he's one of the few that is. And he puts it down to him being taken into care by these Christian charitable schools. So at least he got fed, he got an education. He wasn't being left to his own devices as a 2-year-old kid or something. And the Indians were very bad at making sure their kids attended school. So when he was in the orphanage, that he was able to be subject to that sort of structure of going to classes every day, which can't be a bad thing. Anyway, that was it. So it's very hard to find. Now, can you find cases where some kid would say, remember when I was a kid, they could beat you with a stick at school. It was legal to do that. It's not now. Back then it was. White kids. So they'll point to things, the activists will point to, look at this black kid was hit with a stick. Look at those fucking Nazis. Like it was Hitler. But no. White kids got that treatment too. There was nothing special in it for indigenous. So anyway, now if we look at, they do the same thing in Australia. They do exactly the same thing that were the kids taken from dysfunctional families? Absolutely not. These were good middle-class black families living in waterfront properties, and then Hitler came and dragged the screaming child, ripped the child from the mother's arm. So they use that narrative consistently. That's the narrative they constantly use. Little screaming child ripped from mother's arms. And that's not true. It's simply not true. It's just a propaganda invention, and hysterical one at that. So we need to understand that this propaganda campaign, whether it be in Canada, Australia, or elsewhere, is a globalist, internationally coordinated campaign. So they can prove, look at those evil fucking colonialists. Colonialism was evil. Colonialism was Hitler. It was Nazi. It was fascist. And look, and here's the proof. But they're not producing the proof. All they're doing is telling the most insane lies and engaging in the most absurd misrepresentations, as was clearly shown in that Canadian fiasco where sewerage that was getting over 100 years old was supposedly the bodies of millions of dead children or something. I mean, what a fucking joke. You've been a Tasselist today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.